paycheck in WTA history, and she didn't even know. She said she knew there was some money involved, but she didn't know just how much was involved. So she was very pleased when she found that out. But it did make me think of when Yannick Sinner was asked, did he go to Saudi Arabia for the six Slam Kings for the paycheck? And he said, doesn't play tennis for money. And I think clearly Coco didn't either, because she had no idea of what was coming her way. So that was actually quite a nice moment rather than a, motivated by money win.
Saudi Arabia recently spent $15.5 million on the WTA finals, and Coco Gauff might earn more than $5 million if she wins. That's more money than the majority of Grand Slam winners make. The reward money is unprecedented. Coco just acknowledged how fortunate women's tennis players are to have this chance, and the site is controversial. I suppose one way to put it would be lucky. Please leave a remark below before we break this down. Should players be more worried about the source of the $15.5 million prize money, or is it worth playing in Saudi Arabia? The stats are very astounding, so let's start with them. The total prize money for the WTA finals in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia is $15.5 million. The winner will receive more than $5 million. The winning doubles team receives $950,000. Even those who fail to go past the round-robin phase receive significant payments. Without a doubt, this is the biggest prize fund in the history of women's tennis. It is far less than what players get at Grand Slams. In contrast, it makes the majority of other WTA events seem like pocket change. This story becomes problematic because it takes place in Saudi Arabia, which is why Coco's use of the term lucky is crucial.
The biggest purse in women's tennis history at $4.8 million. Biggest prize money. And they asked her, I loved it. They asked her in the press conference, what are you going to do with this payday? They're like, you just brought home the biggest one. She was like, wait, really? She didn't even know how big the first place prize was. And you could tell it was honest. And they're like, so, are you going to treat yourself? And she's like, well, I had just got a house recently, and then, I'm going to a music festival in a couple weeks. And that was kind of almost like she's alluding to maybe I'll get the VIP package. Of course, she's already in that box, but she's it was just funny. She's like, I'm not somebody that really spends a lot of money, so it's awesome to win, or I'm gonna keep taking care of my family, yada yada. But one of the many reasons I love Coco Gauff.
After winning the Wuhan Open, Coco Gauff was asked about the enormous prize money that was waiting in Riyadh during an interview. To put it gently, her response was intriguing. According to her, tennis is the benchmark for prize money in women's sports, and players are fortunate to have this chance.
Despite all the controversies and criticisms surrounding women's tennis season-ending finale WTA finals, the tournament still got underway in Saudi Arabia's Riyadh. And while many star players like Chris Evert and Martina Navratilova have been vocal in their descent towards the Saudi ambition in women's tennis, particularly the current world number 3 Coco Gauff came out in strong support of this move. She basically says the WTA finals may be a blessing for women's sports in the oil-rich nation. But what does the ground reality in Saudi really say? Is there a discord there? Coco Gauff's statement, I'm sure, makes many believe that Saudi will take women's tennis to the next levels. But will that really translate to a massive change for the women athletes in Saudi?
She gave credit to pioneers like Venus Williams and Billie Jean King for their decades-old fight for equal pay, which is entirely accurate and just. She then changed her topic to discuss tennis's obligation to set an example for other women's sports in terms of compensation. Honorable attitude, totally true point. However, she is saying all of this while defending a competition sponsored by a nation that has one of the worst records for women's rights worldwide. You could cut the irony with a knife because it is so thick. American tennis player Coco Gauff, who has previously been outspoken on social justice problems, is now discussing how fortunate female tennis players are to receive funding from a government that officially mandates that women have male guardians make important life decisions for them. It wasn't until 2018 that Saudi women were allowed to operate automobiles. They continued to be severely restricted in their ability to travel, get married, and enjoy fundamental liberties. However, let's discuss how this $15.5 million is a step forward for women's sports. The cognitive dissonance is quite remarkable. Before anyone accuses Coco in particular of being treated unfairly, let's be clear that she is not the only player who must deal with this conflict. The majority of the top players are taking part without much public trepidation after the WTA as a whole chose to accept Saudi money. In an interview about an event that is essentially sports washing at its best, Coco just so happened to use terms like lucky and responsible. To enhance its reputation abroad and divert attention from violations of human rights, Saudi Arabia is investing billions in sports, entertainment, and cultural events. That isn't a conspiracy theory. According to Vision 2030, that is the Saudi policy. They're not keeping it a secret. Even for someone like Coco, who already has significant endorsement deals, the $5 million prize for the winner is genuinely life-altering money. She collected over $4.8 million when she won the WTA Finals last year, the biggest reward in women's tennis history at the time. The previous competition, which took place in Cancun, provided the funds. Saudi Arabia has now raised that figure even further, making the WTA Finals the most profitable tournament in women's tennis. Why are they doing this? It is the question that no one in tennis seems willing to ask in public. Is it just motivated by a sincere passion for women's tennis and a desire to advance equality? Or is it because investing $15.5 million in a tennis event is a reasonably priced way to purchase favorable press coverage and worldwide legitimacy? In her interview, Coco stated that tennis is a very international sport with players from many different countries, and she hopes that other sports leagues will use tennis as an example to demand equitable compensation. In a vacuum, that's a wonderful sentiment. Players in the WNBA are fighting for improved pay, working conditions, and revenue sharing during the intense CBA discussions. There is no doubt that those athletes should receive higher compensation. Here's the unsettling reality, though. Instead of collaborating with autocratic governments seeking to enhance their reputations, the WNBA players are attempting to get that money from the earnings and ownership structure of their own league. We'll take money from anywhere, as long as the check clears, but we deserve a fair part of the revenue we generate. This is a very big difference. Coco's comparison to other women's sports is intriguing, since it shows how different sports are addressing this problem. Additionally, the LPGA has accepted Saudi funds for competitions. Saudi Arabia hosts formula racing races. There have been significant boxing matches. For instance, women's soccer has been more circumspect. The moral dilemmas associated with playing in nations with subpar human rights records have been raised by individual athletes. That does not imply that soccer has clean hands. Even though many World Cups and other major competitions have taken place in troublesome nations, there has at least been greater public discussion and opposition. Wow, look at this amazing prize money! Seems to be the standard conversation in tennis, with minimal explanation of its origins and motivations. Coco's observation regarding Venus Williams and Billie Jean King's struggle for fair pay is completely true and deserving of recognition. These ladies did fight, and they put up a fierce struggle in the face of strong opposition. Because of their and many others' lobbying, women's tennis has wage parity at Grand Slams. This is where things get tricky, though. Billie Jean King battled for equal compensation from the organizations and tournaments that were already holding tennis competitions. She was not in favor of accepting money from repressive regimes in return for giving them public relations protection. Paying us the same as males for doing the same work is fundamentally different, and we'll take money from anyone who's prepared to pay us, regardless of their human rights record. Because it implies a lack of agency or leverage, Coco's "we're lucky" framing is especially intriguing. For example, female tennis players are simply lucky that Saudi Arabia chose to give them money out of kindness, but this isn't the case. This is not a charitable endeavor on the part of Saudi Arabia. They are investing in their global reputation by doing this. They are purchasing positive media coverage, access to Western audiences, and credibility. Both the WTA and its players voluntarily take part in that deal. Rather than being a deliberate business decision that all parties involved made with full awareness of the ethical ramifications, calling it lucky makes it sound passive, like something that just occurred to tennis players. Since the prize money structure demonstrates the event's financial significance, let's discuss it. Participation fees are considerable even for players who lose a match. Everyone participates in at least 3 matches in the round-robin structure of the competition, and you are compensated for each stage you reach. Therefore, even the 8th-ranked player who finishes the round-robin with 0 and 3 wins may win $100,000. For winning regular WTA Tour events, that is more than the majority of players earn. The point is that there is a huge financial incentive to take part. In order to guarantee that all of the best players attend and give the tournament respectability, Saudi Arabia is providing money that is nearly impossible to turn down. Coco clearly stated that she may get more than $5 million if she wins Riyadh this year. One tournament, that is. Contrast that with Grand Slam prize money. Approximately $3 million is awarded for winning the US Open. Wimbledon is comparable. The French Open and the Australian Open are marginally smaller. Therefore, the Saudi Arabian WTA Finals pays more than any Grand Slam. This is a purposeful tactic to make this tournament seem like the biggest event of the year and the pinnacle of women's tennis. And it is, from a strictly economic standpoint. Players' performance in Riyadh has a big impact on their year-end standings and financial results. Saudi Arabia now has a great deal of influence over the sport. After winning Wuhan, Coco made a comment that is typical of an athlete. She has the level to be the player I want to be. She exudes confidence. She's doing a good job. She has a lot of momentum going into the finals. All right. However, the context of these remarks on a tournament funded by Saudi Arabia adds layers that were most likely not meant. Her goal is to become the world's greatest player. Fantastic. Is it necessary to steal money from repressive governments to be the greatest player in the world? The WTA has determined that's where the money is, so it appears that the answer is yes. There isn't really a way for individual players to leave without suffering serious financial and career repercussions. This raises a more general ethical and sporting issue that no one appears prepared to take seriously. When is it too difficult to accept the money? Would the computation change if Saudi Arabia offered the winner $50 million? $100 million? Does the tennis community have any human rights concerns that would lead them to argue that we shouldn't do this? The answer seems to be no based on the available data. The ethical issues are viewed as small annoyances rather than deal breakers, as long as the facilities are good and the checks are transparent. While Coco's statement that tennis is a global sport with players from many different countries is accurate, it also draws attention to another nuanced facet of the situation. It is unlikely that athletes from countries with their own human rights issues will openly attack Saudi Arabia. Players from nations with diplomatic or commercial ties to Saudi Arabia may be under pressure to participate without causing a stir. Due to the U.S.'s complex relationship with Saudi Arabia, which includes both major arms sales and commercial relationships and condemnation of human rights, American players like Coco are in a slightly unusual position. Most tennis players simply don't speak out against Saudi Arabia because it would be inappropriate to do so while taking their money for tournaments. Coco's parallel to the WNBA's contract bargaining negotiations is particularly interesting because it highlights various ideologies regarding how to improve compensation for female athletes. The WNBA players are attempting to reform the league's finances in order to increase their revenue share, improve working conditions, and develop long-term sustainability. That's tough, unglamorous work with challenging negotiations and the possibility of lockouts or strikes. It's fighting for structural change within the existing framework. One could argue that what the WTA is doing is much easier. Find the person who will pay the most and accept it. Regardless of where the money comes from, both approaches may increase athletes' compensation, but they are not structurally or morally identical. Because luck suggests chance or fortune rather than choice, it is important to consider why Coco deliberately used the word lucky. The fact that Saudi Arabia is offering this money is not fortunate for tennis players. They are choosing to accept it. Saudi Arabia was selected as a partner by the WTA leadership. The players made the decision to participate. By referring to it as luck, agency and accountability are eliminated. The entire affair sounds like a less than deliberate choice to take sports laundry money and more like a fortuitous serendipity that just occurred to benefit everyone involved, thanks to a language maneuver that was most likely inadvertent. This scenario becomes much more complex when one considers Coco's personal background of social justice campaigning.
She has advocated for racial fairness. She's promoted a number of issues by using her position. In the past, she's spoken intelligently and thoughtfully on societal issues. Therefore, it's not as though she doesn't consider these issues or care about unfairness, which makes the acceptance of Saudi money and its portrayal as fortunate all the more startling. It is possible to think about two things at once. It is unethical to receive money from Saudi Arabia to compensate female tennis players who should be paid more. Both are possible. This reward money is unquestionably record-breaking, and it will undoubtedly encourage other competitions and organizations to boost their own prize pools. In the long run, tennis players will likely benefit financially from it. However, it also establishes a precedent whereby nations with unrestricted oil wealth and dismal human rights histories can effectively buy their way into any sport by offering unmatched prize money. That is not a tennis-specific precedent. It's already seen in boxing and mixed martial arts, golf with LIV, and soccer with different leagues and competitions. Because the financial rewards are too great to pass up, athletes are becoming more and more willing to participate in sports, which are increasingly being used by authoritarian governments to enhance their reputations. Coco's use of aspirational and pleasing-sounding sports jargon serves as a model for other women. However, what precisely is the beacon displaying? That athletes would travel anywhere and do anything if the price is right? That pay fairness can be achieved if you're prepared to collaborate with repressive governments? And that financial concerns take precedence over human rights issues? Even if there are unsettling facts about professional sports, other women's sports aren't precisely motivated by them. Perhaps the true lesson here is that it is very hard to achieve equitable compensation within ethical standards, but it is much easier to achieve it by taking money from anyone who is ready to pay. Coco Gauff is calling tennis players fortunate to have the chance to fight for $15 million in Saudi Arabia, which is undoubtedly one way to interpret taking money from sports. Please hit the like and subscribe buttons if this analysis made you think. Leave a remark. Is the ethical trade-off worth the record-breaking prize money?